got hundreds of drone and missile tracks like swarming across Ukraine. Now, this isn't some simulation. It's September 6th and 7th, 2025. And some of those tracks, well, they went somewhere they shouldn't have. They crossed a really critical line. All right, let's unpack this a bit. What exactly happened when those digital lines suddenly became real-world alerts and, triggered this immediate, pretty intense response from Poland, a NATO member?
Yeah, that's exactly what we want to dig into in this deep dive. We need to get past just the headlines, right? We're going to try and understand not just the kinetic event itself, these drones getting into Poland and getting shot down, but also the bigger picture, the geopolitical ripples, especially for NATO. And importantly for you listening, we also want to look at the challenges, the real difficulties in actually communicating this kind of super fast-moving, high-stakes info effectively. What's really interesting here, I think, is how this whole incident might signal a real shift and the implications. They go way beyond just that patch of airspace. We've pulled together quite a bit for this, everything from raw intel maps to some pretty deep strategic analyses trying to connect the dots.
Okay, let's dive right in then. This airspace storm, as people are calling it. We're looking at this map. It's from SRA Monitor War. And yeah, we checked the license at CCBY 4.0, so we can actually show you this. It is dramatic. Black map of Ukraine, just crisscrossed. Hundreds of yellow tracks. Drones, missiles pouring in from the south and east, all heading for the cities. And you see these stark red impact icons lighting up.
It's really something. It's not just a graphic. It tells the story of the sheer scale of what happened that night. Just dense vectors covering the country, multiple strike zones, all active.
Absolutely. And you can see patterns, right? There's this clear Crimea to Kyiv arc, lots of tracks stacked up heading for the central areas. We've seen that kind of saturation attempt before. But the thing that really jumps out are those western corridors. They keep Polish and NATO radars on a complete hair trigger. And this wasn't just a quick flash. These events played out across 2 whole days, September 6th and 7th, 2025.
So, okay, the clean read, our best guess of what likely happened. It looks like a classic saturation night. Russia launches a huge wave, a mix of drones and probably missiles at Ukraine, trying to overwhelm their air defenses. But the critical bit, the new development, was when several of these drones either strayed off course or maybe deliberately pushed right into Polish airspace near the border. And that's where things changed significantly. Polish rules of engagement, the ROE, basically their playbook for responding, they kicked in. But instead of just, flying alongside them, shadowing them like they might have done before, Poland engaged. They actually shot down these intruders over their own territory.
Wow. Okay, that feels like a major step up because we've seen scrambles before, NATO jets going up, but actually shooting something down kinetically over NATO territory linked to this war. That's new, isn't it? What makes this ROE shift so important? Like, how might Moscow read that?
You're absolutely right. It's a huge difference. And it wasn't just Poland acting alone either. NATO aircraft, sensors, they were all feeding into the picture, providing real-time data. So this looked coordinated. And air policing plus air defense response, not just some one-off decision. It suggests a pre-agreed posture, a line they decided they wouldn't let be crossed kinetically. And what's fascinating, like you said, is it immediately makes you ask, why? Why did those drones end up crossing into NATO space? Was it just, bad navigation? Or was something else going on?
Right. And this is where it gets really interesting because there isn't just one answer. There are a few working theories, hypotheses about why those drones crossed. The most likely one, based on what we're seeing, is probably routing under pressure. So the drones are programmed to fly these edge-hugging corridors, right? Trying to sneak past Ukrainian air defenses by flying super close to the border. And maybe something like electronic warfare, EW jamming, or even strong winds, or just a simple GPS glitch could push a few of them just over that line. It's plausible, almost accidental, born out of tactical choices.
That's definitely the leading idea, especially when you think about how chaotic these massive strikes can be. Things go wrong. But yeah, it's not the only possibility people are considering.
No, the second idea is maybe a bit more deliberate.
Yeah.
Probe the fence. This theory suggests Moscow might have been using the cover of this huge attack to, test NATO. See how fast they react, what their current rules of engagement really are in practice. Kind of like poking the bear to see what it does.
Sort of reconnaissance by drone incursion, yeah. And then there's a third one seen as less likely, but you can't completely rule it out. Deliberate intimidation. This would be Moscow taking a calculated risk, flying drones over the border not to start a war, but to create political noise inside NATO. Maybe try and spook some allies, create divisions, without actually triggering Article 5, that's the big one, collective defense.
Okay, so we have these possibilities: accident under pressure, deliberate probing, or maybe even intimidation. When you compare this to things that have happened before, drones flying near borders, what really stands out as new and significant this time?
What's genuinely new, and I think really important, is that these were the first clear kinetic takedowns over NATO territory, directly tied to this war.
Right.
Not just jet scrambling, not just warnings, actual shoot downs. And that signals this major ROE shift we talked about. Poland basically drew a line in the sky and said, cross this and we shoot, not just escort. Plus, it's more proof that the Polish and wider NATO air defense system, their IMD mesh, we call it, that whole network of fighters, missiles, anti-drone systems, radar, it's actually working as intended. It's integrated, it's responsive, it formed a shield.
Okay, so Poland enforced its airspace. Beyond that immediate action, what kind of fallout or ripple effects should we be watching for now, say in the next few days?
All right, so in the immediate aftermath, like the next 72 hours, we'd expect, first, probably firmer public statements from Warsaw, really reinforcing their position. This could potentially lead to Article 4 consultations within NATO. That's not Article 5, remember. It's where a member says, hey, our security feels threatened, let's talk. It's a political step. Operationally, you'll likely see more combat air patrols flying near the border. Tighter NOTAMs, those are the notices to airmen, warnings about hazards, and probably quicker holds put on civilian flights in the area if another big raid comes in, and almost certainly a big counter-UAS surge. More investment, faster deployment of anti-drone tech and sensors along that border, probably using EU and maybe SAFE program funds. The escalation risk, look, it's still seen as small overall, but any night there's a mass strike like this, yeah, that risk definitely ticks up a notch.
Okay, let's broaden the view for a second. How does this connect, if at all, to the bigger picture? Specifically, there's this massive military drill happening right around the same time. We should talk about Zapad 2025. What we know for sure, the joint Russia-Belarus Zapad 2025 exercise, it's scheduled for September 12th to 16th in Belarus. That's the main hot phase. Officially, the numbers are around, 13,000 troops?
Yeah.
But past Zapad drills have often been way bigger in reality than the official number suggested.
That's a key point. And also, Poland didn't wait. They just closed or restricted parts of their border with Belarus, and they specifically cited those upcoming drills as the reason, a clear preemptive move.
So the timing here is really tight, isn't it?
Yeah.
These drone violations, the shootdowns, they happen literally days before Zapad kicks off. And you mentioned some of the drone routes actually came via Belarus. That feels like a pretty significant geographical link.
It really does. It points towards a strong potential connection. There's a pattern here that analysts watch for. Moscow has this history, right? Pairing big military exercises like Zapad with, well, let's call them provocations, gray zone tests. Things like buzzing borders, electronic warfare, GPS jamming, trying to unsettle neighbors or test responses under the cover of the exercise. People were flagging this risk even before the drains crossed. And the geography, like you said, the Belarus vector, that's exactly where Zapad forces stage and operate. So even if Moscow tries to claim it was just drift, hitting Polish airspace from that direction right before the drill, it definitely puts pressure on NATO's decision cycle.
So is Russia saying, oops, sorry, EW pushed our drones off course? Or are they owning it?
Predictably, denials. Russia's line is they didn't aim at Poland, and they're blaming EW drift, navigational errors, which, gives them that classic sliver of deniability. It's standard playbook for these gray zone actions. But you look at the sheer scale of the attack on Ukraine that night, and the specific timing just 2 days before Zapad starts, it really does look more like calibrated pressure, not just random errors piling up. So, we'd probably lean towards calling it likely probing, even if we can't definitively prove the intent behind it.
Okay, so for listeners trying to follow this as it unfolds, what should we be watching for in the next, say, 48 to 96 hours? What signals would either confirm these suspicions or maybe point away from them?
Good question. First, watch the exercise itself, especially as it kicks off. Any repeat incursions into NATO airspace, any noticeable spike in GPS interference or other electronic warfare activity, any missile or drone launches originating from Belarus during that Zapad hot phase. Second, keep an eye on NATO's posture signals. Does Poland actually trigger Article 4 talks? Do we see more sea keys, denser patrols? Are there new, more restrictive NOTAMs issued? And, crucially, do we hear anything about allies agreeing on rules for potentially supporting intercepts across borders? Third, watch the messaging, especially from Belarus. Do they stick to the official troop counts for Zapad, or does it look bigger? Are there any hints of nuke-adjacent drills exercises involving systems that could carry nuclear weapons? Or specific ranges being used near the border. The big picture takeaway here is that Zapad 2025 gives Moscow both cover and a narrative for applying this kind of pressure. These drone incidents, they look an awful lot like a dress rehearsal, testing NATO's decision-making loops right before the main event. So yeah, treat the next few nights as potentially high risk for more probes, and maybe expect more electronic noise than actual fireworks, but stay vigilant.
Okay, wow. We've just gone through a really complex event, the drones, the shoot-downs, the link to Zapad 2025, how NATO is responding. But understanding stuff like this also throws a spotlight on another challenge. How do you, listening right now, actually get good, timely, accurate information about it all? Let's maybe spend a few minutes on what this whole incident teaches us. So navigating the information storm itself. What can you take away to make sense of it all when things are moving so fast?
Yeah, this is really important. It's about becoming a smarter, more critical consumer of information, especially during a crisis. One thing we saw, a key insight maybe, is this idea of trust fragility in crisis cycles. When you're putting out fast updates on kinetic events, things happening now, there's always a risk of small factual slips. Maybe a detail is slightly off initially, and if that's not handled transparently, it can cause disproportionate damage to trust. People latch on to the small errors. So for you, the takeaway is to actively look for sources that are upfront about their confidence levels. Do they use labels like confirmed, likely, or developing? Do they show their work, maybe with footnotes or sources? Do they have a visible corrections policy? Those are good signs.
Right. Transparency matters. And what about when the information itself feels like it's being manipulated? The disinformation angle.
Exactly. That's the disinformation and brigading vector. Security topics, especially sensitive ones like border incidents, they attract coordinated pushback. You see it in comment sections, social media replies, attempts to sow doubt, push alternative, often false narratives. So for you, it means being really mindful of where info is coming from. Is it a known news outlet with editorial standards, or just some anonymous account? Look for sources that maybe pin a comment explaining their standards or sourcing, and maybe even develop your own mental filters. Recognizing patterns in how disinformation spreads can help you navigate those online narratives.
Okay. Even the pictures, the maps we rely on aren't always straightforward, are they?
Not at all. That's the legal licensing exposure on visuals. That PPO radar map we mentioned, super useful, right? But it likely comes with specific usage rules, like the Creative Commons license. Using visuals without checking can be risky. For you, it's just another reminder that even visuals have a backstory. When you see a compelling image or map, just take half a second. Does the caption say where it's from? Is there a credit? Understanding the source of an image just adds another layer to critically assessing the information you're getting.
And just the sheer speed required for breaking news must create pressures behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. That leads to what you could call operational latency or manual bottlenecks. Think about the people actually producing the news updates, the graphics, the headlines, especially during a surge like this. It's often done by hand, under pressure. That can lead to delays, maybe missing the optimal window to report something, or just burnout. For you, understanding this pressure helps manage expectations. Those first, super fast reports, they're often built using templates, pre-made graphics. They prioritize speed, which means you probably shouldn't expect deep nuance right away. Be patient. Look for the follow-up analysis that comes later. There's also platform dependence. Relying only on, say, YouTube or Twitter for news means you're subject to their algorithms, their demonetization rules, even censorship risk. For you, the lesson is diversification. Don't put all your information eggs in one digital basket. Follow multiple outlets, maybe subscribe to some newsletters, check out podcast feeds. It makes your information diet more resilient.
It really sounds like just staying informed well is becoming a skill you have to actively cultivate these days.
It really is. And one of the most fascinating things for us analyzing how people engage is what we call a meaningful misfit. We notice that you, the audience, as learners, often seem to value clear titles and tags, sometimes even more than direct links to sources initially. It suggests you want clarity and speed first. But, and this is key, there's still a clear need for the proof, the provenance, to be nearby, easily accessible. Also, the really high interest in the Zapad connection piece shows there's a strong appetite for the what does it all mean explainers, not just the bare headlines. So maybe this raises an important question. For you personally, when you're trying to understand a crisis, what's the right mix? What combination of speed, clarity, and real depth actually helps you feel informed without just feeling overwhelmed?
That's a great question to ponder. What a deep dive this has been. We've covered so much ground today. We looked at the drone incursions into Poland, a pretty unprecedented kinetic event. We explored Poland's apparent shift in rules of engagement. We talked about the strong strategic links to the Zapad 2025 exercise happening right next door. And maybe just as importantly, we dug into the challenges in information itself, how it flows, how it can be confusing, and how you can navigate that information storm during fast-moving global events.
Yeah, I think the bottom line from the sources is pretty clear on this one. This wasn't just business as usual on the border. Poland definitely moved from just patrolling that fence to actively enforcing it kinetically. And the timing, alongside Zapad, it makes those drone intrusions look very much like, well, a dress rehearsal, testing NATO's reactions right before the big exercise kicks off.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. If these kinds of methods, the probing, the subtle pressure, the gray zone tactics, combined with this constant battle over the narrative, if this is becoming like the new normal in how nations interact, what new habits, what critical thinking frameworks can you start building to move beyond just consuming information to really understanding its layers, identifying its sources, figuring out its intent? Essentially, how can you become your own personal problem identification engine when you're trying to make sense of these complex world events?